OneLitPodcast may contain adult language and sensitive subject matter. Please take care while listening.
Hey everyone, I'm Olivia.
I'm Andrea.
I'm Hayden.
And welcome to our first episode of OneLitPodcast.
Woo!
So since this is our first episode, I thought we could introduce ourselves. We'll talk about what this podcast is, what we're going to be doing, what we might like to see in the future, and so forth. So, like I said, I'm Olivia. I'm going to be your host for the next couple weeks. My favorite kind of books are kind of a mix between fantasy, supernatural, romance, and I am a sucker for good crime books. And Andrea and I are actually best friends. We met in college and found out that we were both English majors. So really from like the first things we connected about were books and writing. So Andrea, what would you say your favorite genre of books are? And then you can introduce Hayden.
Yeah. So my favorite books are pretty much any type of fiction. I like some fantasy, and I also love true crime books as well. I'm not very big on like nonfiction, but I do know my husband Hayden is. He loves memoirs. So Hayden, what else do you like?
Well, to help myself get into reading, I really got into horror, but I found that I actually love memoirs and nonfiction, and it's got me reading even more. And I always will love fiction otherwise. So that's why this is a good choice. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires.
Mm-hmm.
A novel by Grady Hendrix.
So me and Andrea are friends. Hayden is Andrea's husband, and then I actually met my future husband through Hayden, which he's probably not going to be on the podcast with us. He's not that big into reading or anything, but he does read vicariously through me because I'm always telling him what I'm reading and everything. So we're kind of just, one big group of friends, all just doing this together. So the idea for this podcast actually came after a night when we were drinking. Andrea and I were talking about books and writing, and we were kind of just like, it would be super fun
if we did a podcast
where we got drunk and discussed books. So we talked about doing that. And then Hayden got wind of what we were doing. He wanted to join. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We all have our drinks with us. Yes. What are y'all drinking tonight?
Well, I'm drinking a sweet red wine by Huber Winery, Sweet Marcella.
That is what we both are drinking.
Oh, you're also drinking.
Yeah. And I'm actually not drinking wine. I'm drinking a margarita tonight, but,
Someone had their bachelorette party this weekend.
Yeah. So I'm just drinking leftover margarita stuff. And if you want to join us drinking, feel free to. I know not everyone drinks, but you can grab a water or a soda. Just kind of relax with us while we discuss books. And we did have a blurb at the beginning, just warning everyone that this podcast is probably going to be a little bit explicit. We're going to be drinking, and we're not going to filter ourselves. So if it's not your style, then just don't listen.
And the subject matter of the books are going to be a little iffy too.
Yeah, we're going to be discussing some crazy ass books sometimes. We're going to try to offer trigger warnings before. If there's anything really bad going on that you need to be aware of, we're all into reading some pretty weird shit. So just take that into consideration before listening also. But yeah, this podcast is just a place where we're all going to come together, discuss books, writing, things going on in the world of literature. Some of the things we're planning on doing is, so we'll pick a book and do a review on that, which is going to be the main part of these episodes. And then depending on how long it is, we're going to break it up into sections, just talk about what we read for the week. Like this week, we're discussing chapters 1 through 6 of our book. If we read anything on our own, we're going to be discussing that. We'll talk about any news going on in the literary world. We're going to be talking about writing. If anybody wrote anything that week, we're going to discuss that. But honestly, Andrea, I think between the three of us, you do most of the writing. But we'd eventually like to have people send us stuff to read. Do you want to talk about that, Andrea?
Yeah.
What they can send to us?
So we would think it would be really nice and awesome to feature authors. Now, when I say authors, that doesn't mean you have to be published or anything like that. Of course not. If you're just venturing into writing and you're not sure how you feel about it and you want opinions or you just want to get it out there for people to hear, we would love for you to submit your story, your poems, or an excerpt from a longer piece, and we'll read it for you on the show. You can submit your stories to us at onelitpod@gmail.com. That is onelitpod@gmail.com. And if you would like to remain anonymous, that is perfectly fine. And you can put that in the subject line, and we will not reveal your identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the main thing there is just like, we just want to promote writers and authors, even if it's just like a silly little fan fiction that you wrote on Reddit or something. Like, you created that, and that's awesome. So you can send us anything. If we get a lot of stuff coming in, we'll kind of pick and choose what we like read on here or anything. But yeah, feel free to send us whatever. And I know that we would love for this to turn into something if y'all like it, and we can keep creating content for you guys. But honestly, just being here with y'all, just doing something fun and creative, it's going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into this.
All right.
So pour yourself a drink, snuggle up in a cozy corner, and get ready to get lit. We decided that whoever chooses the book we're gonna be going over is basically gonna be like the leader, host, whatever, until we're done with it, and then we're gonna rotate. So since I picked this first book, you'll have to listen to me, and then we'll go on, and like Andrea will pick something to read, and then Hayden, or vice versa, just so everyone gets a chance at picking a book that they'd like to read. So I'm gonna give an overview of the book. I'll ask some questions, and we'll just discuss the chapters that we picked for this week, what we liked, didn't like. And mind you that this book and probably all of our books are going to be blind reads. We've never read this before. We're going to go through it only about 100 pages at a time, so we have no idea what's going to happen in the book in the future. And we also decided that we're not allowed to talk to each other about the book outside of the podcast. Yes. So it's going to be fun to see what everyone thinks. So I picked our first book, which is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And he's written a lot of other books that I'd like to read in the future, including My Best Friend's Exorcism and How to Sell a Haunted House, to name a few. This book came out in 2020 and is centered around Patricia Campbell, a Charleston housewife who faces the everyday struggles with dealing with a workaholic husband, 2 ungrateful teenagers, and a senile mother-in-law. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, a close-knit group of women who are united by their love of true crime books. When Patricia gets attacked one night after book club by an elderly neighbor, the neighbor's handsome nephew, James Harris, gets thrown into her life. James is well-traveled and well-read, and he makes Patricia feel things she hasn't felt in years. But when children on the other side of town go missing, their deaths written off by local police, Patricia has reason to believe James Harris is more of a Bundy than a Brad Pitt. The real problem, James is a monster of a different kind, and Patricia has already invited him in. Little by little, James will insinuate himself into Patricia's life and try to take everything she took for granted, including the book club, but she won't surrender without a fight in this blood-soaked tale of neighborly kindness gone wrong. So that's kind of just the blurb on the back and everything. And I thought this was a great book to start off our podcast with because, we're kind of like our own little book club here. And like everyone who listens is free to join. I will say I don't see us fighting vampires in the foreseeable future, but...
Right.
All right, so...
And of course, spoiler warning.
Yes, there will be spoiler alerts if you haven't read it.
If you have not read this book and you want to read this book,
I highly recommend.
Turn this off now.
And I'll be honest, after reading the first 100 pages, I feel like the title is a bit of a spoiler.
I mean, yeah.
I kind of wish that the title was a little different. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I don't want to get into it too much just yet, but there's been some moments where I'm like, okay, so this is what's happening. You shouldn't have done that. But we can get into it. We can start at the beginning, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, I was just gonna start off by asking, like, what are your general thoughts about it so far? You liking it?
Yeah. We've only read chapters 1 through 9.
Yeah.
Yes. Stopped at chapter 10, page 106.
We have not said anything to each other, and that's been hard. But yeah, I liked this part of the book. It's really easy to read. It took me no time.
Mm-hmm.
Language is very easy to digest. It's enjoyable so far, especially near the end where things picked up.
For me, being a person who has leaned more towards nonfiction here lately, I didn't want to start it. I didn't really want to read it at first.
It's a book. It says slaying vampires.
I know.
How does that not sound
Didn't sell it to
interesting?
him.
Well, I had just finished a couple of, nonfiction pieces, so moving back to this was a little bit hard to do, but I read it within a day, the first 100 pages. So I really want to read more. It's a good start, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely picks up towards
picked
the
up
end
quick.
of where we started in the chapters. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of books start off pretty kind of slow because you gotta like build the world.
Right, and I've
And the
noticed that
characters.
they're very descriptive with their worlds, too. I mean, they really describe everything
Yes.
around them and their surroundings really well.
Mm-hmm.
So it really paints a picture, and that's sort of how I read too. Is I imagine it, like a movie in my head. Some
Yeah.
people are just able to go through books, and I take my time.
I think that is a hallmark of a good book, is that you picture it in your head like a movie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You can't picture it in your head like a movie and you're like, oh, I'm just trudging through this to find out what happens, or because it's so hyped on book talk or something like that.
Yeah. And the description of this book, I mean, it's vivid
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
You definitely know what's going on, and
Yeah. And
you can really imagine it.
actually, I highlighted a few, like a passage, of course, English lit major. So there are some words that the author uses that, kind of like foreshadow that this may be a bloody book.
Okay.
So it is the very beginning of chapter 2 where the author describes her kids, Patricia's children getting out of class or school.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses the words bowels of the academy, and the double doors opened and disgorged a mob of small children strapped beneath bulging, spine-bending book bags.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pick up on that, but
Yeah.
that could definitely be foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just like a lot of words that are they may seem like just randomly thrown in there, but it is like it
Mhm.
adds to this like kind of like dark feeling of like where the book is headed.
Right. And I highlighted it because I think this was like the first part where they were so like back to back.
Mm-hmm.
It was like very noticeable to me. Okay, it's an interesting choice of words. So
Yeah.
what's gonna happen? Because up to this point, they're just talking about books. And then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, well, that's an interesting way to describe your children leaving their school for the
Yeah.
day.
Also, so what do you think about Patricia? Because she's kind of just like a regular housewife, and like it starts in the 80s,
Mhm.
and I think where we are right now is like sometime in the late 90s and everything. So it kind of like travels, like we have a time jump.
Right.
But she's just like a housewife. She's wanting more with her life and everything. She like the first book club that she was in, she's just had like so much stuff to do and everything. She
Love that part in the very beginning.
I
It reminded
did.
me of school.
I know.
Didn't read the book,
Yes.
and you had to give a report on it.
Yes, I felt that.
And whoever, I forgot what that lady's name is, the lady that runs that book
Oh, yeah,
club,
Marjorie.
Marjorie. She asks her something like, "What did you think of this part?"
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I loved it. It was like, that wasn't even in the book.
That character's not even in this book. You're lying.
Or it was, I think she's like, there was an excerpt from like Gandhi or something. It's like, how did you feel about that? It's like, I just loved it.
Oh no, it wasn't Gandhi.
It wasn't Gandhi.
It was Nelson Mandela.
Mandela.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which Nelson Mandela was still a child
Right. Yeah.
during the time of when the book was written.
Yeah. So I had a little note like, ooh, reminds me of college.
I have a report and I didn't read it.
Yeah. It's like, I've had so much to do. Like, she's a housewife. She's running everything. She has 2 kids, and her
and I love that
mother-in-law is
actually,
like has dementia or something.
Actually, nobody.
Read it. Nobody wanted to read the book. It was Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Patton, which I have read that book, but I don't remember anything about it. So
it wasn't very memorable.
It wasn't very memorable. So
according to the people here in this book, South Africa, and that's all you know about it.
Like, it passed.
I feel so bad for South Africa, and that's it. None of them read it.
Oh yeah, the things going on in South Africa are horrible. I totally agree. It's like, did anybody read this book? And they're like, no.
No.
So then she joins this other book club, and like the only things they read are like true crime and like smutty romance novels.
Yes.
And I'm just like, I would fit in there. So they're like,
yeah, and that's that whole like culture versus like, non-cultured literature, right? So that they're trying to read this book that's been hyped up as like high class literature, and then
versus fun.
Yeah, Kitty comes to her with this smutty romance book, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I could never clutch my pearls read this."
But she's like, "I finished that.
In like 3 days."
Yeah, so it's just like, don't jump on the bandwagon. Everyone's like, "Oh, this book is like awesome and everything." You just read what you want. Yeah, like I said, like we read some pretty weird stuff here. If you're not into that, that's fine. It's like, if you want to read, you're like, just nice. I don't even know. What do you mean? I don't know. just
if you want to read your smut,
something that reads like a textbook.
If you want to read your smut, I like my smut. I'll admit to that.
Say sorry, Mom and Dad. And with that, I'll pour me a glass.
So that's going on. And then one night after leaving book club, and she's just like, wow, I wish something would happen in my life that's interesting.
This town is boring.
She gets attacked by her neighbor. What did you think of that?
I loved it.
Yes.
I did love
feel
it.
bad for her.
Yeah.
But the way that it's described, I love.
So vivid.
So,
like, the setting was vivid. She was vivid.
She's upset about the trash not being how it's supposed to be. Trash is about to run. Someone, her husband or kid should have done it. Goes out there just with a flashlight. Next thing you know, you just see a pair of feet down an alley that raises up to this dirty pinkish white nightgown. And there's an old woman with a raccoon hanging out of her mouth.
Yeah. She's like tearing the intestines out of the raccoon and eating them.
Gnawing on it.
Hanging out of her mouth.
Yeah. So very vivid, very gross.
The thing that struck me too was not only the description of this old woman, because she didn't recognize her at first. And of course, her being this polite Southern woman, she says, "Hello, can I help you?"
Yeah.
And gets charged.
It's like, oh my gosh, this is my neighbor.
Yes.
Okay.
Realizes this is her neighbor, and the neighbor lunges towards her, pins her down, and the thing that I remember most is this old woman, who is obviously deranged, is opening her mouth in front of Patricia's face, and she says that she can feel the fleas of the raccoon hitting her on the face.
Yes, I know, yeah. Yeah, stuff like that.
That stuck with me for sure.
It's described so well that you can you can feel that. Like,
the hot, searing pain of her ear being bitten off.
Yeah.
I think it's like a hot summer day, isn't it? So it's already like humid and gross and she's bloody,
Yeah.
sweaty.
I'm sure it stinks because
Yeah.
of the
And something
trash
else that is very telling
trash.
is the fact that she's upset about her earring
Oh my god.
Yeah.
being swallowed, and then coming to find out that what she thought was a nice piece of jewelry that her
Yes.
husband got for
I
her
was so mad.
was prop jewelry that was
Yeah.
given to him.
because he seems like a piece of trash.
I will admit he is selfish.
He's literally a doctor, and she talks about how like all of the gifts that he gives her, they're like half-assed
Drugstore.
or
Yeah, from
like
the
Drugstore
drugstore.
pieces.
Soda
he doesn't
shop.
give her nice gifts, and yeah,
But he got this promotion at work, so she
Yeah.
really thought, oh, these earrings are really something special.
The earrings that she gets, they're like, oh yeah, he finally got me something good.
Nice pearls.
And then yeah, she finds out that like, oh, they were given to me for free. I was just like, you're a piece of shit.
I have a
Like,
friend
she
who's
didn't
in prop
beat herself
jewelry.
up, like, I lost my earrings.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like
she just got her ear gnawed off.
Oh, that's
She's
prop
like-
jewelry. You can throw the other one away.
yeah.
Just gnawed off. And she's like, I'm sorry, I lost my earring, baby. And
Yeah.
she's like, well, it was fake anyway.
Yeah, so just like how the husband treats her and everything, which, oh, whatever. You can say, oh, that's just the times. It was the 80s
Yeah.
and 90s. That's like how like a quote-unquote normal marriage was, I guess, back then or whatever. But yeah, just like how the husband treated her, I'm just like, yeah, it's no wonder that you want like something more in life, and how like once you meet James, you like kind of start like he makes her feel like something
Listened
different.
to.
Yeah, like important, because her husband isn't making her feel important. Her kids aren't making her feel important. So
I also feel like it's really telling of how sort of naive Patricia is, because she did think that it was really a nice piece, and she was even waiting for it to pass through the old woman to get it back. And whenever James does come into the picture, which we'll get to in a moment, again, incredibly naive, even though at this point he does seem nice, very naive about it.
Yeah, okay. When she literally walks into his house after reading all these true crime novels at her book club.
yeah,
But-
Spoiler alert, really quick. Guide to Slaying Vampires. She invited him specifically
Yeah, I highlighted that.
into her home.
I was.
He said, "Oh, so is that an official invitation?"
He's like, only if it's an official invitation.
I was my last question I was gonna ask. So James Harris, vampire, and like, what are some of the signs?
Or just a night owl. Can't go out in the sunlight.
Yeah, it's like, what are some of the like warning signs that Patricia should have noticed about like him being a vampire? So we got the like
Invitation.
to be invited in.
The obvious one is that she thought he was dead.
She thought,
Yes.
he's laying there. She's like,
She used to
this
be a
man's
nurse.
fault.
So she brings a casserole over to the old woman's nephew, who did eventually die, the one that bit her ear off. She brings a casserole to the nephew, goes into the home, which of course she says, I shouldn't have done that later.
Yeah.
But
Just
she
walks
goes in,
in.
yes, with a casserole in hand, walks into this shoddy house, walks all the way to the back, and sees this man who I guess described as sort of shriveled up and laying there, not breathing.
Yeah, he's like pale.
Like, yeah.
Pale, skin
breathing.
sort of shriveled, not breathing at all, decides to give him CPR. And says that her nurse instincts kicked in.
And then he like wakes up and is like,
Who are you?
What's going
Why are you
on?
in my house?
She's like, I thought you were dead. It's like, I am dead. So yeah, so there's that. So he tells her, because she comes over the next day to like they talk to each other, and she's like apologizing, and he's just like, I need to go do stuff, but I'm allergic to the sun because a wolf bit me and I got an infection and now my eyes can't dilate.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just like, how does that work?
You know, part of me was like, I kind of buy it.
If it was an
infection.
that like traveled up to like I guess his head or whatever. I could see that. But my first impression was, how does a wolf bite go from? If anything, you should
Be a werewolf.
be a werewolf and not a vampire.
He's breaking stereotypes.
I thought about that too. I thought to myself, could he be?
Got bit by a wolf and turned into a vampire.
Yeah.
But people do have photosensitivity and are allergic to the sun.
That's true.
Yeah, incredibly sweaty, weak in the sun. So I guess the next thing that happens before she helps him with the banking
I
situation.
was gonna say he does like come over the next night, like actually at night, and when she opens the door, she's like, "Oh wow, he's like really handsome," and not like how dead he looked.
Not
the
shriveled
day
anymore.
before.
She does describe him as being like this tall, handsome, sort of muscular looking guy.
Attractive.
But right before that happens, apparently a roach falls into the demented grandmother's glass and she almost drinks it.
I actually forgot about that.
Yeah.
So I was pretty shocked
And
that they
Patricia,
actually had
like-
roaches.
Patricia hesitated.
Wow.
Her kids were like, "Mom, are you gonna let her?"
Yeah,
drink
she
that?"
does make a comment like she keeps her house so clean and everything that she's
It's
like, oh my
embarrassing to her.
gosh. It's embarrassing to her, like within her own family,
Right.
because she's like, oh, my family's gonna say stuff about the house not being clean. Whenever she's like, when I bust my ass cleaning this house.
Yeah, she says that she has no time for anything
Yeah.
because she's constantly busy.
Yeah.
Yet there's roaches falling from the chandelier. So how does that work?
I don't know. Well, you were the
And the other thing as well in that scene is that the grandmother, well, the mother-in-law, I mean, actually seems to recognize James Harrison
yeah.
and calls him, what was his name? Hoyt.
Wait.
Yeah.
Hoyt.
She says that she has a picture of him
Yes, but she can't find it.
and that he's stolen money,
hmm
which he does, quote unquote, find a large satchel of money in his aunt's house.
Like $86,000
Yeah, like-
in a duffel bag.
Thousands of dollars. And he's like, I gotta put this in the bank, but my wallet was conveniently stolen.
Yeah.
My
ID,
birth certificate.
Newsflash, I don't have any identification, but I need to put it in the bank. So poor
like, I got
Patricia.
Patricia's like, "Sounds legit."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Patricia helps him out, co-signing the bank,
Yeah.
and is getting all this money for him, signing the checks to turn the water on, turn the gas on, which he does pay her back.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's good at least.
Yeah.
But she did mention she hasn't cashed it yet. She
Yes.
likes the feeling of the money. She's impressed by money, it seems.
Yes, I was thinking that how she's like not putting it back in the bank yet. So it's kind of just like, and like she does mention that like whenever all this money comes out and they like balance the checkbooks, like
Right.
her husband's gonna.
She's kind of
notice.
worried that her husband's.
He hasn't yet. I don't think he looks. I don't think he looks at it.
Really
Yeah,
not.
so I don't know if like that's gonna come into play, but it's kind of just like like she's kind of
And he
like,
probably
putting money aside.
he probably won't look because he thinks Patricia's just content and would not dare
Yeah,
interfere with the finances.
yeah, he probably like trusts her to a T.
Yeah, she doesn't
No.
complain to him about anything.
My wife would never.
Yeah. That's just that mentality of the times.
Another kind of like vampire-ish thing that makes him look like a vampire. So he says he's not religious and everything, but then like one of the people in the book club, I think it's like Grace,
Mhm.
she's like,
Yeah,
do
she's
you want
very
to come to
religious.
St. Joseph?
Come to my church.
And it said that he was like making plans like
To go.
with her to go.
Right.
So I'm kind of just like, I wonder like if we're gonna see that. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know if there's gonna be like a little like they might like have book club together and Grace might come over to Patricia and be like, so he came to church like one Sunday and something shady happened.
I'm curious where this is going to go.
Sweaty and
Mhm.
What kind of church was it?
it was like a Catholic.
So maybe
Which, I mean,
It'd be like Passover, and they bring out the little wine, the little blood of Christ. He's like, oh, this isn't blood.
also, we haven't seen him eat anything yet.
That is also
Right,
true.
his dinner got interrupted.
Yeah, because, she brought the casserole, but he just came back with it empty.
Well, it actually broke, and he pieced it back together.
Did it break?
I think so.
I don't remember it breaking.
I thought it did break.
I think it just spilled.
I think she just kind of dropped it on the floor. Because he brought the, dish back
Clean
to her.
casserole dish back.
Yeah.
And at that dinner scene where the mother-in-law freaks out,
Yes.
he's given vanilla ice cream, but
Yes.
doesn't eat it.
Doesn't eat it because the grandma freaks out. And then at their book club thing, they're all sitting there. And there's little snacks and everything there, which you're not required to eat it or
You are
anything.
required.
The little cheese sticks.
Yeah. So that gets interrupted whenever the grandmother comes out again and has another incident where she's accusing him of being white and everything. So we haven't seen him eat anything.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like he is very, very good at manipulation. He's playing it naive as well.
Oh, yeah.
But every single thing that he is asking Patricia to do, she does it.
Yeah.
Really without
I
hesitation.
mean, is that because Patricia actually wants to, or is it because that is also a characteristic of vampires that they manipulate?
I thought that she did kind of, because whenever he was asking her to take him to the bank, he was like, it's so bright out and I can't drive. And she was like, do I really have to, take this man to the bank?
Not only
she
that,
didn't really want to.
Not only that, they had to take his van
with
the very dark tinted windows.
Yeah, that she was like, oh gosh, I
Boarded up
Yeah,
with wood
boarded
in
up
the back.
windows.
Do I want to get in this van?
She said specifically she hated that feeling of just this dark void behind her.
I think a little bit of that was just her being like, just if someone asked you to do something, you should, out of consideration and everything. Especially because he was just I have a. This is gonna sound bad. I have a disability, which is perfectly fine if it's a legit disability, but that man's a vampire. So
It comes back and he's not a vampire.
I was thinking that. I was like, what if this man
literally
is
has
actually
this disability?
I sort of think that I don't really know. I mean, there are signs that are showing that yes, he is a vampire, but I don't know. It's really hard to tell.
It would definitely be a blind side on.
I'm kind of leaning.
Part.
It'd be a
If
plot
it was
twist.
a completely different person who is a vampire, I would kind of love that.
I'm kind of leaning towards that he's not actually a vampire, but I think she is leaning
'Cause you
almost
think
to an affair.
Yeah.
Because whenever she does the CPR, even the next day, she
Yeah,
does
she's
say
thinking-
specifically, all the way home, quote unquote,
Feel of his
Patricia tasted Anne Savage's nephew on her lips. And then goes into descriptions about what it tastes like. So she's thinking about it.
She likes it.
Yeah, I think
She wants to do more CPR on her.
I think
Mhm.
the idea that it's forbidden.
Mhm.
She goes to this house and she knows she shouldn't be going into this man's dark house.
Yeah.
She's worried people are going to see her. Worried people are going to see her get into this van.
Well, that one housekeeper does see her coming out.
Yeah.
Which then suddenly,
Which she
supposedly,
disappeared.
she quit,
Quote,
he
unquote.
says.
Yeah, quits.
James Harrison said that she quit. What was her name? Francine, I think.
I think so.
But all of a sudden disappeared.
I think she mentioned something about it whenever he said that she quit. I think Patricia was like, well, I feel like that's unlikely.
Yeah, it's not like her to quit.
Yeah.
Because I think how long she worked for your aunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, they said that she had a what's the right wording? She had I'm drawing a blank. She had the personality of vinegar. So you wouldn't think that she would be a quitter
Oh, yeah.
at all. So I'm really curious as to where this is going to go after these first 100 pages. We know that she's established this book club for years. Now her sick, demented mother-in-law is living with them and has been there for a few years. But fortunately, they have Miss Green to help out.
Yeah, I was going to say that about the book club. I think it's really nice to see like all of them coming together for each other. So yeah, like they have the book club, and then all of this stuff is going on with Patricia and like her mother-in-law who's like in the stages of like dementia and everything. So like people from the book club come over and they like have all of this like special medical equipment and gifts to her, and then one of the other ladies
that was
like
sweet.
sends a nurse to the house.
Yes.
Like,
At an
to be
affordable
an
price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But I think one of the things that kept happening is Patricia never asked for help. She said,
She never
"This is
did,
what's
yeah.
happening," and that I forget that one lady, not Kitty, but the one lady that just takes in information and doesn't say anything back and just leaves. And then like the next day, she gets what she wants,
yeah.
like the medical equipment.
Yeah.
So do you think it's like I didn't ask for this? So
I think she thinks it's rude
So
to ask.
you think that
Yes.
Patricia thinks it's like rude?
Yes.
She is old
like
school.
it's rude for her not to help this guy whose aunt
yeah.
died,
Yeah.
even though she knows nothing about him.
Yeah.
Also, on top of all this, I was going to say, I've lost it now. The boy's getting sick.
You okay, buddy? Allergies.
What was I going to say?
He's just hacking.
Oh, I find it interesting that these women have been together and getting together for years, but they're still figuring things out about each other. For example, I'm forgetting her name now. I should take notes. One of the women who talks about to save time, because Patricia is always talking about how she can't save time. One of the women,
Yes.
apparently, it might be Kitty. I'm not
Kitty's
sure.
the funny one.
Well, she makes, it might be Slick.
Slick is the
She makes all of her children's lunches at one day.
That's Slick. Yeah, Slick.
At like did she say the
It
month?
was the beginning of the month. She makes sandwiches for the entire month and freezes them.
And then, of course, they give her shit for that because they're like, your kids don't like that. She says, I put it in the lunch, and then by the time lunch comes around,
It's gone.
it's thawed. It's ready to go. And, of course, they give her shit about it, saying, your kids don't eat that. They're just too polite to tell you that they hate it.
I mean, it is gross.
Yeah.
It's like wet bread.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, like frozen bread unfrozen.
Yeah, and then it would thaw out, and it would just get wet.
Mm-hmm.
They're not eating it.
I'm judging her.
Yeah, they're
That's
not eating
gross
it.
and a health hazard, I'm sure.
And it's the 90s.
No excuse.
I mean, we did eat a ton of bad stuff in the 90s.
Yeah.
Everything, like all that artificial dye, green ketchup, which I'm sure goes
Green
like that.
ketchup.
Healthy.
I am curious, though, since we sort of think that James Harrison is a vampire, does that mean that Anne Savage was a vampire?
See, because, like, what was wrong with her whenever she attacked Patricia? I mean, she was, like, pretty feral. Like,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like going around the trash can, like, literally, like, eating a raccoon and everything.
And
just-
digging through trash that had, like,
Yeah.
the mother-in-law's poopy diapers
Yeah.
and other things in it as well.
Yeah. So, and then, yeah, she just, like, basically attacks Patricia like a wild animal, essentially. So, yeah, I was curious, like, what happened with her because, like, James had been at her house for quite a while.
Yes, the
Before
van
that
had been out
happened,
there for a while
They
because
had
the
noticed
dog,
van.
the dog pees on it as she lets it out.
So yeah, so it's kind of just like, what if he did anything to her? Did he do to her to make her like turn into this creature? But
And
I
is
don't
he
know, like-
really her nephew? We don't know.
That's true.
That could-
We don't know yet.
Nobody can
Exactly.
back it up. They just know he rode into town
Yeah.
in his van and it's
In
been
a-
sitting out.
A kid snatcher van with tinted windows and no sort of identification.
Which Patricia does state that he seems to be lying to a lot of people. Like he keeps telling them different stories.
Yes.
Because he like told her that like, oh, I like grew up just traveling around, and then like somebody asked him
Where
and
he's
they were
from.
like, oh, I'm from South Dakota.
And he's
So she's
I
like,
traveled through
"What?"
South
You said you were a military brat and travel all the way around.
And then like whenever he was putting his money in at the bank, he's like, yeah, I do a lot of like landscaping for people. And she's like, how do you landscape for people if you literally can't even be in the sun?
Right.
So there are, like, I feel like she does see, like, a little bit.
He's got some holes in his stories.
Yeah, and that he's lying to people, so.
Now, what do we think about the last chapter and sort of the last scene before we get to the end of chapter 9, where they are having that book club meeting, and all of a sudden the mother-in-law walks in completely naked and wet, varicose veins and all.
Yeah.
Get that image in real quick. Old woman naked and wet and claiming that James is another man and that she has a photograph.
Yeah. Well,
Then she backtracks, right? She's like, that's not him.
It's not, yeah, it's like a different picture that she has, but she's just like, I know the picture somewhere. Like, she knows that she does have a picture of this man who's claiming to be James Herrick.
And do we have an opinion on if the grandmother, or not the grandmother, well, yes, she's a grandmother, but
Yeah,
the mother-in-law, we'll just describe her as, do we think that her talking about there being owls and having been bitten by an owl, she claims, does that have any meaning?
Well, I wondered if that was like a premonition thing, because
it could be dementia, it could be premonition, it could be something she's actually experiencing.
Patricia goes on to say, like, before she became, like, had dementia, people used to come to her to figure out, like, forecasts for their crops, and
she was sort of a spiritual person, right?
Yeah, like, or winning numbers or something. They would come to her.
So you think she's having a few premonitions?
She could be.
I think it could be a premonition, which owls are a bad omen.
A bad omen.
And she said she was bitten by an owl. That's what she claimed. Yeah, she claims that at one point. Like I said, on our next episode, I'm going to have some more detailed points. I'm going to start taking actual notes.
Yeah, I was going to. But I felt like, since it was just kind of the beginning, I feel like it was more like setting up, and there wasn't like a ton of stuff that happened. So I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about.
I think a lot of this is foreshadowing for what's to come, and I am excited to keep reading more. I didn't want to put it down, but we had to.
Are we done?
Yeah, unless there's anything else you want to talk about. We're at 43 minutes currently.
Yeah, no, I think we're
done with the book.
Yeah, we got a couple other things to talk about. So yeah, if people want to read along with us, next week we're going to be going over chapters 10 through 19 in the book.
That'll be fun.
Y'all can read along with us. Like I said, like, this is going to be our own little book club. Mm-hmm. We're just going to have a fun time. All right, so now we're just going to do a little segment. We're just calling book talk. We're just going to talk about, like, if we're currently reading something on our own. We can kind of just mention what we're reading. Who wants to start?
So I've not started reading anything else other than this book, but the next one I'm going to be reading is something my dad recommended, and it's actually called The Education of Little Tree. And it's a book that came out, I believe, in the 70s by a man named Forrest Carter. And it's apparently it was released originally back in the 70s as a sort of memoir, which of course later was found not to be true, but highly recommended. I picked up a used copy. And again, it's The Education of Little Tree by Forrest Carter. I'm going to start it here soon. So I should have an update for that in the next episode. Smut.
No. I'm not reading smut. I decided I was going to finish.
Oh, yes.
Midnight Sun. Yeah. The last book in the Twilight Saga, which is Edward's point of view. And I thought it was fitting because we're reading about vampires, even though different kind of vampire.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to knock it out because I started it in 2020 during the pandemic thinking, I'm going to knock this out. But I didn't. And we're in 2024 now. And I got 100 pages left to go.
So, I've not read any of them. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen any of the movies.
I want you to watch the movies. They're fun.
So, this is the same book that was released, just from a different perspective.
Yes. So, Twilight.
That seems crazy to me.
Twilight is from Bella's point of view.
So this is the same exact book, just from Edward's perspective.
Yes. Edward has a lot to say. You get a lot of the history of Edward because he's been around since 1918. So he goes into...
He's old.
So he's an old man that's attracted to young girls.
He's a teenager.
He's a pedophile.
That's been alive for...
Said it once and I'll say it again. That man's a pedophile.
I mean, it's not wrong.
It's a little weird.
Why is he in high school after these young girls? After he's over,
Well,
what,
he
100
has
years?
to be in high school because...
He doesn't have to be. No, why would he have to be?
Well, he looks young. He looks 17.
So?
So he needs to be in school or
Get a fake ID.
people get suspicious.
He could just say he's homeschooled.
Yes. I don't think there's so many plot holes. And I've not even read the book.
Now, in the first one, they do say he was homeschooled for all. The younger they start out, the longer they can stay.
He had a craving for young girls.
No. They're vegetarians. They don't drink human blood.
It's okay. I've never read any of the Twilight books.
What does that mean? They have to drink
animal
blood. That's not vegetarian.
That's what they call themselves. Sort of vegetarians.
Sort of vegetarian.
Humanitarians.
They say it's like a human solely living on tofu. It keeps you satiated, but you're not
Fulfilled.
fulfilled.
Okay.
So it keeps them nice and strong, but it's
I
not
can't get
amazing.
on board. I can't do it. You enjoy that all you want.
I mean, I can tell, like, now that I'm older and not, like,
In high school.
less than middle school reading this,
Yeah.
that it's definitely meant for a younger audience.
Oh, you should mention what we've talked about, where she talks about how he sees her collarbone and just loses his mind while
So-
she's sitting there in her slightly not low-cut shirt and
Okay.
khaki skirt.
So, no. Midnight Sun does not mention the khaki skirt at all.
Which one's that?
Twilight, the first one, because Stephenie Meyer is Mormon. Bella wears khaki skirt, and Edward says something like she was wearing that sinful khaki skirt. And the Twilight community just kind of like bypasses that because they're like,
Super
what's
hot.
sinful about a khaki skirt.
Into that.
But she's wearing they go to their dinner after she was cornered by those three guys that were, I guess, potentially going to sexually assault her. Edward swoops in and saves the day. They go to dinner, and she's wearing this low-cut blue blouse, and he's like staring at her, staring right there, you know, like a man would. And he's like, I just couldn't get over like that low-cut blouse and how it highlighted the structure of her collarbones. And
You know, when
was
I think
like,
about a woman,
it's the
I think about her
collarbones.
collarbones. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Those sinful collarbones.
That's why we got married.
I got amazing
The
collarbones.
first thing you noticed about her.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
That first date.
That's why we sat there for like 3 hours. He's just staring at my collarbones.
9 Diet Cokes later. All right, Olivia, what are you reading?
All right. So I'm currently working on. So I am reading smut,
Oh.
and
What are you reading?
so I am reading the Haunting Adeline kind of books.
Hayden has no idea what happens in that because I've read them. And I'm like, I'm not telling you what happens in this.
So
This will be a treat for me.
a really big, like, that entire book is a trigger warning.
Yes.
Because it's basically this girl has a stalker, and
They bang.
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. She bangs her stalker.
And-
Okay.
In the first one, it's like there's.
I feel like
Is there a knife in the first one? Like knife play
Oh.
in the first one?
there's
If
gunplay.
there's gunplay in the first one, definitely. If there's not knife play in the first one,
I
then
would
it's
say it
definitely in the
is
second.
questionable that it is gunplay because that implies that she willingly consented to
Yeah.
the gun and it's fun for her.
Was it
Yeah.
loaded?
Yes.
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 I'm getting some imagery in my mind, and I don't know if I want to go there.
I'm thinking exactly what it is.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a
And
good
she's
time.
like scared to death that he's gonna kill her
From the inside.
from the inside.
It's definitely like it was a good book and everything. And
You said it was good.
It's a duet and everything. So there's 2 books to the series and everything. And in the second one, she gets kidnapped and everything, but like she ends up getting rescued by the guy and everything who's her stalker, because it comes out like he literally like works to dismantle like sex rings and everything.
Okay.
But it's very
There's a lot to unpack here.
This is a whole other podcast. Maybe a special podcast. Because
Coming soon to Patreon.
that book has its problems and its plot holes.
Yes.
But you're going to sit and read it because you're like, what the heck happens next?
Yes.
How could this
Get crazy.
escalate any further?
So it's definitely weird because it starts off and like at the beginning, like what he does to her does seem very unconsensual sometimes, but on the other hand, she kind of does like egg him on a little bit, like.
So she's asking for it.
Oh God.
Like, yeah, a little bit, kind of, because she's just like, he's like, I'm gonna punish you, and she's like, I'd like to see you try, but like, and then he's like, I like you better believe me that I do like what I say and everything. And he's just like,
You think I'm bluffing?
so obsessed with her and everything, and he's just
So like she goes on dates with this mafia man, and he like cuts off his hand because he touched her.
he literally
And
kills
sends it
this
to her
guy.
on the doorstep, and she opens it.
Yeah.
It's his hand,
So yeah,
which puts her in more danger.
yeah. So it's definitely like back and forth, and like these people are not like black and white and everything. They are very complicated,
Very morally gray.
Yes.
Some of them.
but like in the end, like they fall in, like she ends up falling in love with him basically. But it's like it's just so weird and everything. I like it, and like definitely like once she gets kidnapped and everything, and like the other people who like are
Probably
hurting
should have
her.
said spoilers.
Yeah, well, you know.
If you're listening to this podcast, just be prepared for spoilers.
We
anytime
find
mention
spoilers
it.
at the beginning of the
Okay,
podcast.
exactly. But yeah, like the other people that are like torturing her basically, and it's just like, wow, I really wish Zayd was here. Because like, yeah, even though you like stalked her in the beginning,
Right.
Like
It makes no sense because Zayd is like, I am against evil and I don't like that men take advantage of women, but then he does all this stuff to Adeline.
Yeah, because he knows what he's into and everything, and he does like push her a little bit, but like especially whenever she comes back and she has all that trauma, like he stays away from
He
her,
does.
and he doesn't push her, and he's like,
He goes through a lot in that second book.
because he does work in that field, and he's like, I know what I like, and I enjoy like pushing you to your limits, but I understand right now you've gone through this and I can't do that. So like he is respectful, like in a sense that way. Sometimes
Small percentage.
Sometimes he does push her, but
Tiny
it's like,
percentage.
it's like you like him on one hand, but on the other hand, you're like, wow, you're really messed up.
So you're currently reading this.
So
She's finished.
I just finished the second book in like the duet of the two, and then there's like an like a separate book called Where's Molly, who goes over a different character from the second book and everything. So I was gonna start reading that and everything. So that's where I am.
Now, I wanted to tell you this.
Yeah.
I saw this recommended on my Kindle Girlies
Okay.
Facebook page. Because I was looking like, I want something like spooky to read. And the title of this, it's a Halloween smutty book.
Okay.
It's called Carving for Kara or Kara.
Carving for Care.
Yes. And it's
Is it an erotic pumpkin?
it's about a guy in a mask, I think. Hello, Hayden. It's about
I'm back.
a guy in a mask that chases her through a pumpkin patch. And like the first thing says, like, to all the girls that romanticize about being chased by a guy in a mask through a pumpkin patch, and then explicit
Banging.
banging, doing the nasty.
Yeah.
This book is for you. That's the
Okay.
that's the forward of the book. So I was like, that could be entertaining to read. I don't want that. I like reading books that you're kind of like, this is probably a train wreck, and I love reading train wrecks. And I'm like, okay, I'm on board.
Yeah. I'll admit it right now. I love those kind of like random smutty books because they're so funny sometimes.
They're so unrealistic.
So unrealistic, but it's great.
If we were to get any viewers and they like the same things that you all like, they would hate listening to me talk about the books that I've read recently. For example,
Read this nonfiction.
I did talk about how I'm going to read The Education of Little Tree,
That's definitely not.
which is nothing like what is just described. But what I just read is a book by Gene Wilder called My French Whore. And the title does sound explicit. It's really not. It's actually a really charming story of this man who joins the army during World War I, is a coward and runs away from battle and impersonates a German spy and meets a French whore. But, as the story progresses, she had to become that person. She didn't have a choice. And they fall in love. And it's really a beautiful story. Don't like the way it ended, but of course...
And your dad's actually read this.
Yes, my dad just read it too.
And he was like,
I recommended it.
Like,
He didn't like the ending either because we believe that the main character made a wrong choice, but
yeah.
It's a very charming story. That was a quick read. It was only just a couple hundred pages.
We want to go.
If you would like to, do you want to read it?
I can. Yeah. So obviously, since this is our first episode and everything, we obviously don't have anybody
any
who,
submissions.
who submitted anything. I got just a little, because Andrea and I were like I said, we were English majors and everything, and I took some creative writing classes, so I'm just gonna write. I'm just gonna read this little writing exercise that I had to do for a class. It's just 2 pages.
Hey!
Hayden and Andrea have finished their entire bottle of wine.
It's grape juice. It's good.
It is grape juice, guys.
The Sweet Marcella, sweet red wine, if you want to join us.
It's not what is the other one that's actual?
Oh, that was the Sweet Walter.
Sweet Walter's red is grape juice. This one actually tastes a little like wine.
A little. All right. Sorry, Olivia.
That was so rudely interrupted.
Sorry.
But yeah, so I'm just gonna read a little. It's just a writing exercise, basically, that I had to do. It was a sad fall of dusk that fell in Burnsley that day. What better night than this to have a bonfire? As Eric gathered wood for the fire, Lexi prepared the hot dogs and marshmallows they would roast. As the light from the sun shrank away, the fire grew higher and higher. It was so relaxing, sitting with Eric and having no cares in the world. They were sitting, huddled together on a blanket, with another blanket wrapped around their shoulders. Lexi closed her eyes and felt the cool night around her. The smell of fire leaped into her nose and drove her back to their old house, that house that had been destroyed 1 year ago. Flashback. She woke to the sounds of crackling wood and the distant cries of Eric. As she sat up in bed, she was instantly aware of the pulsing heat that surrounded her. She jumped out of bed, grabbing a pair of slippers on the way so that maybe her feet wouldn't get burned too much. As she tried to grope her way through the thick smoke, she followed the sounds of Eric that were coming from downstairs. Then a crackling crunch sounded, and after her ears stopped ringing with fire, she couldn't hear Eric anymore. Even though fire was surrounding her, she still went cold with the sound of his silence. As she made it to the top of the stairs, she could barely see Eric lying on the burning floor, with some of the ceiling that had knocked him out. The flames leapt higher and higher until Eric's face was barely distinguishable through the flaming red wall. The smoke filled her mouth and nose, making it hard for her to breathe. She had no choice. She had to save him. She ripped off a piece of her shirt to wrap around her nose and mouth so she wouldn't breathe in any of the smoke, and then she jumped through the fire towards his unconscious body. There was no time to check if he was still breathing. The house would collapse on them in a matter of minutes. If there was any chance of getting to safety, they had to get out. Now. She wrapped her arms underneath his shoulders and started pulling him towards the exit. Oh, how she dreaded all those years of not going to the gym. She could barely lift her own body weight off the ground, and he just had to get himself knocked out and be extra weight that she had to drag to safety. 10 steps to the door. Her breathing came in short, spasmodic gasps now from dragging his weight across the floor. 6 steps to the door. Her arms began to scream up at her in pain. 3 steps to the door. She used up her remaining strength and lunged for the door handle while the roof started to fall in on her. She grabbed the doorknob and wrenched it open, tumbling out onto the front lawn with Eric still wrapped in her arms. She started moving away from the burning house, timbers crackling and roof falling in on itself. As soon as she got a considerable distance away, she started seeing to Eric and his wounds. A fire truck and ambulance should be on their way soon. As she sat on the curb of the street, one thought kept coming to mind. This was no accident. Somebody wanted both her and Eric dead. And that's it.
Snaps for Olivia.
Thank you. So that was kind of just like a writing exercise that I did. Kind of like, it'd be kind of a cool intro to something.
Potentially a crime novel.
Exactly.
Who lit the fire?
Exactly. Who wants them dead?
I love spasmodic as a word.
So that was our little
writing segment. That could be you. Submit your stories to onelitpod@gmail.com for your chance to be featured on next week's podcast.
And then last little blurb that we're doing. We just got a little bit of literary news that I found in the week. So South Korean author Han Kang, best known for her work The Vegetarian, has won the Nobel Prize in Literature. That was in the news just a couple of days ago. For her intense poetic prose that confronts historical traumas and exposes the fragility of human life.
Oh, nice.
Just a little bit of literary news. We can have a breaking news.
Of course.
A little blurb in there. All right, Andrea, if you want to close us out, tell people how to contact us and like us on social media.
Okay, yeah. So you can find us on TikTok at OneLitPod, Instagram, YouTube under the same name, OneLitPod, ONELITPOD. And then, of course, the email, the ONELITPOD@gmail.com. Yeah, we'd love to hear what you thought of this week's podcast, what you would like to see in the future. Yeah.
Open to suggestion. But in next week's episode, of course, we'll be going through the next 100 pages of this book and be going over it.
So do your reading and catch up. We're going to spoil the next 100 pages.
All right, and we'll see you guys next week on One Lit Podcast.
See ya!
Bye.
Bye.